Hello, I'm Lisa Bonnice, and this is Mind Yourself. This week, my guest is karmic astrologer Marguerite Manning. And our topic today is how to begin to answer the eternal questions. Why am I here? What's my life's purpose? Marguerite Manning is a professional astrologer and best-selling author whose groundbreaking work in karmic astrology has helped thousands worldwide live up to their purpose in life by uncovering their soul's past in their birth chart. She certainly helped me. I've known Marguerite and her work for many years and have a deep respect for what she has to offer, and I'm sure you'll feel the same. Marguerite was one of my favorite guests on my podcast, Shapeshifting, and in fact, she even wrote a blurb for my first novel, Be Careful What You Wish For, which has been recently updated and republished as The Poppet Master. I know you're going to love her as much as I do, so let's get started. So Marguerite, it is so great to have you here today. Welcome. So good to see you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's a joy to be here.
I'm so looking forward to our conversation today, especially about karmic astrology, which is your specialty, and your newest book, Unlocking Your 12th House, which is a really handy workbook for users to easily figure out this important segment of their karmic astrology. And this is your fourth book, right? After Cosmic Karma,
book.
Sign Language, and Making Cosmic
Your
Sense
karmic
of the
match made in heaven. Do you know your karmic match made in heaven? And then this is the first workbook. So this was really important to me because I wanted to give readers, my biggest thing is teaching, and I wanted to help people understand how they can find their way around their own birth chart. But from my jumping off point, which is always the past. Most astrologers start with the present. I start with the past because that's my passion. But I think in moving forward today and finding our purpose in this life is really dependent on learning where we left off in the last one, and more importantly, what we improperly programmed from that last lifetime, because we're human. And whatever happened to us, there's usually a major event or a major set of circumstances in a previous life that have colored our way of thinking and our approach in this one by choice, because this was something we wanted to overcome. So that's the really passionate part of me. Helping this workbook helps people look into their chart and see. It's really to talk to the soul. My work is about, I always tell my clients and readers, it's about validating the soul. In other words, saying to the soul, yes, this did happen to you. Somebody's listening. And then it's almost as if at that point, you can move on and move forward. It's kind of like what shrinks do when they have you on your couch. I don't know. I always tell the story that back in the 70s, I bought this beautiful blue turquoise Volkswagen with a convertible top, and I'm thinking I'm the only one in the world with this car. And after I bought it, I'm seeing like 10,000 of them all over the road, and I'm thinking it was in my conscious awareness for the first time. And that's what I think we do in this lifetime. It's in our unconscious. And the minute we bring these old habit patterns into our conscious awareness through this workbook, we say, aha, now I get it. That's why I do this. Now I understand why I let this person do that to me, or I let this obstruct my happiness. And I think that's very empowering when you can find that out about yourself. And when you've discovered it yourself based on the energies that you were born under. And you were one of the few people very early on, 10 years ago, that were really also very fascinated with the idea of, you didn't know much about astrology, as much as I didn't know much about your work, but you were so fascinated, a true Sagittarian, in finding out more about it and looking, underneath the covers and taking a deep dive. And I think that's what all of us, we don't realize this is a science. And that very much, if you take a sample of your blood and put it under a microscope, a doctor might tell you the potential you have for certain diseases, certain talents, certain, strengths, physical strengths. It's the same thing with your birth energies. It's all about your potential. But what I think we look at astrology backwards, it's not potential because we just happen to be born under those birth energies. We were born under those birth energies because we have that potential. We promise to use it in this lifetime.
Okay, wow, that's a really great jumping off point here. I love that your specialty is karmic astrology, and I know that you've sort of laid a really nice foundation here, but what is it about karmic astrology specifically that captured your attention so thoroughly? What brought you to this work?
What brought me to this work originally was, and she's no longer with us, it was an astrologer, Debbie Kempton Smith. She passed away last year, but I read her book. And she was talking about the 12th house. And then I had done some work over at the Edgar Cayce Institute. And I realized that the 12th house, Edgar Cayce, who was a psychic that many people adored, the Association of Research and Enlightenment here in Virginia Beach, they have all kinds of records. And I went in and I studied all of his records. And he was, and after I had read Debbie Kempton Smith's book, in his readings that he did under hypnosis years and years before, in the early 20s and 30s, he talked about the soul coming into each lifetime within the first 30 degrees above the eastern horizon. That's where the soul enters. It's the portal for the soul in each lifetime. That's exactly where the 12th house is. In the birth chart, those first 30 degrees above the eastern horizon, as seen from your place of birth, is the 12th house. It's where the sun came up over the horizon that morning. That's the 12th house. So it made me see that the science, the psychology, and the astrology really all jived. And that was incredibly interesting to me. So I started doing research. I started expanding the formulas and looking further into this. And I realized that whether it was kind of like that aha moment you have in first grade when you're taught by the flashcards that 5 and 5 is 10. So you go through your whole first grade thinking 5 and 5 is 10. Then you realize, wait, 8 and 2 is 10. 6 and 4 is 10. 3 and 7 is 10. And then so it made me realize whether I was studying science or numerology or psychology, all roads pointed to Rome. Every person, whether they were on, like I said, a shrink's couch, or you were doing their birth chart, or they were talking to a psychologist, or you were putting their physical potential, you were working with a physical doctor, it all everything came up the same. So it made me realize that going back and finding out what we were here to, why each life we come back in each life for a purpose, and our lives are much more rewarding when we know what that purpose is. It doesn't mean that you're going to start hearing angels sing and bells chiming when you find out, but all of a sudden, every single client I've had in my own circumstances with my children, raising them, it's almost as if you're riding the tide. You're moving with the universe. You're not fighting it. You're not pushing round pegs into square holes. Doesn't mean you won't have your set of challenges, but I think understanding why you're having them doesn't lessen them, but it gives you a little bit more power and a little bit more fortitude to get through them. And then, you can't help it. We are here. We are human beings, and we are supposed to be living this, evolving spiritually in the physical world. So we have one foot in spirituality, the soul, and the other foot down here coming from the ego. And we have to somehow make them jive. And according to Edgar Cayce, and this is what the sun represents in our chart, is an honorable human life. And an honorable human life to me is one the body has worked for and the soul can be proud of. So I don't care if I have difficulty with people say, oh, we should give all our riches away. We should be so. That's not an honorable human life. An honorable human life is manifesting something on the physical plane that you can be proud of. If you're creating an organization that is so lucrative and you give away money, you give people jobs, that's something to be proud of as well. Mm-hmm. We're here in this realm to manifest on a physical level in a way that makes the soul evolve on the next level. And that's kind of tricky because we sometimes go through one tunnel or the other. We get very egotistical and we're driving with our Mars, get out of my way. Who are you? You want a piece of me? Or then we're being very spiritual, leading with our Neptune saying, that's it. Take everything I own. I'll be the victim. And it's somewhere in between. It's not one or the other. And that's what I love about karmic astrology. We can go back and say, okay, now I know what my contract with the universe is. And then you can feel a little selfish about fulfilling it. That you go, okay, I don't want to come back to this classroom again. You're not going to be punished. I always say, God isn't punishing. It's just that, okay, you don't have to do the work. You don't have to show up. But guess what? Guess who's going to be back here next year in the same classroom? Mm-hmm. And you think, okay, not so much. I don't want to be here again. So then it makes you get serious about why you're here in that regard.
Right.
It's really it's very enlightening. And I find it a very gratifying work when people get their aha moment. Like when you and I were just talking, you say, that happened to me in this life. Then you can turn around. And I always say, it's not about getting angry with our parents or angry with the people that we're here to learn from. It's about recognizing that we chose to come back this time to have proper programming, to not let those situations, those people, those events, derail us in this lifetime. Mm-hmm. And we can do it in a way that doesn't derail them, even if it's just sometimes removing ourselves from them,
Yeah. And this sounds like also it really answers, I think, one of the most common questions that people I know who are into, transformation, et cetera, they want to know, what is my life's purpose? And they can spend a huge amount of time and effort and energy and many, many years just trying to nail down, why am I here?
Right.
What am I supposed to be doing here? And what you're talking about here with karmic astrology seems like it helps to answer that question.
It certainly does, Lisa. You're absolutely right, because just like looking at your chart, my starting off point is the sign on the 12th house with Leo on your 12th house cusp. Your improper programming from your last lifetime, and you've okayed me to share this, is that you were taught to believe that responsibility and stardom was going to be your ruin. So as much as now you're driven in this lifetime on a physical level to get out there, get your message out there, but there's a part of your soul that when you get close might do things to undermine you, to pull you back, to keep you safe.
Mm-hmm.
Where once you understand, wait a minute, there's nothing to be afraid of here. And I always say to people with Leo on the 12th, you want the applause, you have to get into the spotlight. You can't be cautious about that. You can't be worried. You have to take a risk and get out there. So it's almost like getting right back up on that horse, putting yourself out there and saying, okay, I'm not going to die here. This is the same thing that happened to me yesterday isn't going to happen again. And it's usually where someone else took advantage of your power and used it in a way that got you into trouble.
Right,
and so these people usually have problems with, if they're not fulfilling their contract with the universe. Your sun is in the 3rd house, so you're here to teach. That sun rules Leo, and it's in the 3rd house. So you're here to educate, not surprisingly, write, teach, and expand people's mental awareness. And you can't do it in the comfort of a tiny classroom. It's got to be more global with your Sagittarian sun. You need a pulpit. But your downfall could be, because we all have them, is if you get too preachy. You have to give other people the room to have their, and that's what you're really good at. Because what it is about the Sagittarius sun is you're here, you want desperately to be understood in this lifetime. Desperately. And you're really powerful when it comes to helping others understand. And that's the minute that you do that, then you're completely understood. But you have to stay away from that. I have to prove to the outside world that I didn't do that. I didn't do this. That's not. I'm not responsible for that, because that you were left holding the bag in your last lifetime.
Yeah,
and that's really hurtful, humiliating fall from grace for us people with Leo on the 12th.
Yeah.
So we kind of shy away from that. We'd rather be the power behind the throne in this lifetime. And we're really good at that, but that's not what you signed up for. You signed up to be the one sitting in the throne and being somebody in the outside world in this lifetime. And the closest hard aspect, which I take you through each one of the 6 major keys of finding your soul's path, and one is any planets in the 12th, but you don't have to have a planet in the 12th, but the ruler of your 12th is the sun. So you have to look for the closest hard aspect to that sun to see what had the most overwhelming impact, was most injurious to you in your last lifetime. But yours happens to be Pluto, and it's coming from your 12th house. And that tells me right up front that this was a family member or somebody very close that had the power of an authority figure over you. Could have been an agent, it could have been a teacher, and it could have been a parent. Somebody who was emotionally manipulating you to live their life. In other words, if you were I really believe yours was in the entertainment field, but if you were in the field of government, which Leo could be, kings, queens, presidents, it's almost as if you had an advisor that was trying to get you to fulfill their agenda, not yours. Because you didn't lack you lacked a little bit of the confidence, which is how they liked you. You fulfilled their agenda, and it hit the fan. And guess who was left holding the bag? And that was you.
Wow.
So being responsible for others, having our own children, unhealthy romances, these are things our soul will do to keep us off the path of our creative self-expression coming forward. Particularly your case with Leo on the 12th.
Right. Okay.
Does any of that sound familiar?
It absolutely, all of it does. We could go on for days. And in a little bit, we'll actually go through each of the
Sure.
keys that are in the workbooks. I want people to be able to sort of follow along with their own charts and figure out how this applies to them. That's one of the things I love about your books, is that they really are easy to, you read the information here, you have your own chart, and you can apply. You don't have to even know how to read an astrology chart. All you have to know is how to get one. So let me go ahead and ask that. Where do you recommend people get a copy of their own chart? Because they're going to need this if they're going to use
They
the
can
book.
Google on, and they can just Google birth chart on online and get a free birth chart. They can come to my website, fill out the contact form on my contact page, and I will send them a set of my cosmic karma work charts if they want to join my mailing list. But it's pretty easy to get a birth chart today, but they can definitely come to margueritemanning.com and join my mailing list. I'll send them a set of charts that I designed to be used with my books. So
Great.
it makes things a little bit easier too.
Okay. Now, so I know this is a real common question. What if you don't know what time you were born? Because that's a pretty important piece of
For
information.
my work, it really is. That's very significant. That's really important to know the time, because you have to know the tilt of the Earth's axis to know what constellation, what sign was right there on the eastern horizon at the moment of your birth, so you can determine what sign was on your 12th house. And I tell people, and I'm really a fanatic about this, and I have never, ever had someone come back to me and say it didn't happen. I'm a firm believer that when the soul is ready to hear this information, you find the time and you start to look. I can't tell you how many times I said to people, I could have read them, but I said, I don't want to give you inaccurate information. This is so precise. Talk to people who knew your parents the day you were born, look through old information, talk. And every single one of them, and there might have been about a dozen in my lifetime where I didn't have the time, I've come back and said, you're absolutely right. I found this here. Because I'm convinced that when the teachers, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. When that soul is ready for the information, it finds the birth information for you.
Yeah,
Many
that's
times
true.
we don't have it because the soul isn't quite ready to absorb it.
Right. That actually happened with my mom couldn't remember exactly what time I was born. She said, I think it's about 3 a.m. So I went through most of my life using 3 a.m. For all of the charts that I was creating. And then out of the blue, I just happened to find access to the birth record that had the time, and it turns out I was born at 1:23 a.m., which gives me an entirely different rising sign.
Absolutely.
Changes my chart significantly. And like you said, up until then, maybe I needed to think that this was my rising sign, so I was following this not quite accurate information. And then bingo, when I was able to find this is the actual information, it changed everything for me.
And it probably gave you a view that maybe 10 years ago you wouldn't have either absorbed or been ready to handle.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times in reads or sessions people actually break down and cry, but I say, that's really good. I think that's a wonderful thing, because it's really the feeling of the inner self, the soul feeling finally somebody understands what happened back then. And that's why I said validating the soul is my favorite part, because I'll say to many people, this might not sound familiar to you. And there hasn't been one time in all the years I've been doing this where it didn't resonate. And that has nothing to do with me. That has to do with the moment you were born is a celestial documentation of who you are soul-wise, who your spirit is, and where you're going. So if you know how to read those energies, and what I always say, this, the soul was the spiritual energies we were born under is a celestial reflection of the spiritual agenda our soul was born into. That's the physical energies and the spiritual, showing that they're linked together. That I believe that when we leave this each lifetime, and both of us have had experiences with people who've passed, but I believe that when we leave, I read this book years ago by Raymond Moody, Life After Life, and he talked about everybody from every different walk of life, no matter whether they were Jewish or they were Christian or they were, Muslim, no matter where they lived, what their culture was, they all had the same experience. Where these were people that died and came back, had clinical deaths. And when they came back, they would all have the same experience, where they saw this big beam of light that was warming and overwhelmingly encouraging. And they would go through their life. And hence that expression, our life passes before us. But it was never in a judgmental way. It was always like, look, well, you did really well. Okay, next time you'll do better here. And then I believe what happens at the end of that is this being of light, this omnipresent God, universal mind, whatever you want to call it, says, okay, Lisa, now that you've finished this, what do you want to do the next life? And you say, okay, give me relationships 101 or give me parenthood 102. The universe says, okay, puts all the energies into place. And the moment the universe moves into those energies, Mars in the 4th house, Venus in the 10th, boom, Lisa is dispatched to this planet to report for duty. So I believe it's a universal clock that's ticking forward all the time. And when it hits those energies that end up being our birth chart is when we're dispatched, because that's what we chose.
Right. Okay. That makes so much sense.
And so it's really not a birth. We should celebrate it as a birthday, but it's a spiritual agenda in disguise. And so that's why it's very interesting to look at it that way, that you didn't come into this world to learn how to be a Sagittarius. As I say in my books, your sun sign is your degree. That's what you aced in your last lifetime. Promoting, educating, teaching and preaching and showing people on a global level. You might have gotten into trouble for it, but that's, you can wake up every day. You know how to do that, like falling off a log. Where did you promise to do that in this lifetime? That's the house of your Sagittarian sun. That's the mathematical relationship the sun had to the earth at the moment of your birth. And in the 3rd house, you can be a Sagittarius with your eyes closed while you're sleeping. The difficult part and the heavy lifting will always occur to you with siblings, with your neighbors, with your classmates, will always be in that immediate learning environment, because that's what you're here to dominate. You're here to be the teacher, the merchant, the person in the immediate environment that is a powerful influence to others.
Okay. Wow. Well, now I want to get into the how-tos of the book, Unlocking Your 12th House, the workbook. But before we go there, I'd love to talk about something else entirely. That's Mercury in retrograde, because as we speak, in October 2019, it's coming up soon on Halloween, interesting enough.
Exactly.
And a lot of people live in fear of this time because sometimes feels like everything just goes kaflooey, electronics.
It does, but there's a reason for it. And again, I think we look at astrology backwards. As I say in the article that I wrote years ago that you referenced, Mercury retrograde, above the hype and beyond the spin. Everybody's talking about the lost calls, the lost baggage, the dropped internet. Like everything is so off kilter when Mercury is retrograde. But if you look at the reason for that, Mercury is the planet of the mind, and it rules. Our ancient astrologers saw it was so blindingly fast that it circled the sun so quickly 2 times, and how Mercury retrograde, it's actually doesn't go retrograde, but as I say in the article, what happens is it shoots by us it passes us twice every time in every 88 days. The first time it passes us, before it heads on to the other side of the sun, we're not at an angle where we can see that. So then when it circles the sun and gets to the other side, as it starts to go around the other side, to us here on this planet, it looks like it's drifting backward against the stars. So for that period, till we catch up in the cycle and we can see it's moving forward, it appears to be retrograde. And that's what everything is, appearance and perspective in astrology. So during that period of time, I believe, again, we look at astrology backwards, there's a reason that Mercury, this planet of the mind, the planet of connecting information to people, appears to be going backward. And it's because it's giving us a window of opportunity to find and see everything that actually did go backwards in the last 88 days. It's giving us a second chance to do things over, or to second chance to find out what's flawed. That's why I say during this period of time, don't get married, don't sign documents, don't sign a contract. But this is the perfect time to go looking for the things that you've lost, finding out information that you never thought you'd be able to access. Quick story with Mercury retrograde. The first time I had an article published, right after my first book, Cosmic Karma, was published, I got word that Mountain Astrologer was going to review the book. And it was during a Mercury retrograde, and I wasn't even thinking of it at the time, but I wanted to get a copy of the magazine when the review came out. They never tell you what the review is until it comes out in the magazine, and I'm sweating bullets and thinking, okay, I hope that it's a very prestigious magazine. I was hoping they gave me a good review. So I called Mountain Astrologer, and I spoke to the editor's desk, and I said, I'm Marguerite Manning. A book is being reviewed. My editor, Llewellyn, told me the book was being reviewed. I said, and in next month's issue, she said, oh, would you like a copy of the review? I said, I sure would. And she sent me a copy of the review. This is the time, like any other time, that never would have happened. I don't know why. This is the time to ask questions, you'll get answers. This is the time to look for information you could never get before, you'll get it. It's also the time that you'll get information you might not don't snoop, because you're going to find out the truth, and it might not be what you like either. Also, I say never hit the send button without looking at who you've mailed it to, because this is the time. Think of it. You're being used as a tool for other people to get information as well. So, they might find out what you've been saying about them behind their back if you sent the email to the wrong person. So just make sure that you've got everything, your ducks all lined up in a row. But I'm not afraid of Mercury retrograde. I look at it as an incredible time to do research. So I've had clients say, I found my ring on the beach. I never thought I'd find it again. Go looking. Get out. People hide under the bed when Mercury's retrograde. I would not. And if you buy anything during a Mercury retrograde, look at it this way. Sometimes you're forced to. But the problem is, during a Mercury retrograde, all the flawed merchandise, information, and material is coming to the surface. So when you go trotting into the toaster store to buy a toaster, all the bad ones have come to the surface, the ones that have problems and defects, because they've got to be discovered now. What better way to be discovered than if somebody buys them and brings them back? So it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. Things have to be done over, because the flawed information, if the flight is canceled, be grateful. They found something wrong with the plane. If you've lost your luggage, it's going to come back to you eventually. But there's a reason that all of these things happened. And I would rather people look for what was part of that information coming to you, because that's the real gem. That's what the universe is trying to tell you. Look, you missed this. This isn't the airline to go on next time, or this isn't the person to book your flights the next time. So to use it to your advantage, and put up with the 3-week issue of, just being careful what you say to whom. I also tell people that this is the perfect time to go out and looking for Mr. Right, because you can find him. You're going to find everybody else as well, so it's not going to be a whole lot of fun. Yeah, but you will find what you're looking for during the Mercury retrograde. You just can't, if you're willing to be out there taking all the punches and putting up with the dropped calls and this type of thing. I really love Mercury retrograde, and I'm ruled by Mercury as a Gemini and a rising Virgo. So I know what this planet has to offer, and many times it's a whole lot of waiting, or they're more like annoying inconveniences than anything else. But if you look for what it is that's being brought to your attention, I find that worth everything.
Okay. Well, okay. Thank you so much for weighing in on that topic. I know it's something that really bugs a lot of people. But let's go ahead and get into the workbook. Let me give people the information on how to find it. As Marguerite mentioned, her website is margueritemanning.com. And at the top of the page, you'll find a menu bar. You just click on the word books, and you will easily find it there. And so if you go ahead and download that, you can follow along with us. We're going to talk about, we're going to use my chart as an example. So once again, margueritemanning.com, and then look for books. So we're going to go ahead and give you plenty of time to download it. Next time, we'll talk about the how-tos of combining the information on your chart with the information in the book. So once again, you can get the workbook, Unlocking Your 12th House, at margueritemanning.com, and look for the menu that says books to find it. That's where we'll stop for today. Once again, you can check out Marguerite's website at margueritemanning.com to download her workbook, Unlocking Your 12th House. And be sure to listen into part 2 next week, when we get into a step-by-step explanation about how to use the workbook and how to interpret your own karmic astrology. You'll find a link to Marguerite's website below, and while you're at it, leave your comments below too. Let's have a conversation. Until then, I'm Lisa Bonnice. Thanks for watching. See you next time.